I didn't catch them with a shoe under the bed or a stranger sprinting out the back door. Betrayal arrived politely, as vibration and glass. Her iPad lit up on the kitchen island while I was rinsing cilantro, and a preview bar slid across the lock screen like a whisper I wasn't meant to hear. Marco. Same place. No photos this time. Key at front. The knife in my hand stopped halfway through the stems. A single drop of water traveled down the blade and hung there, refusing to fall, like even gravity wanted to know how this turned out. I didn't touch the iPad. I didn't need to. My body had already memorized the message the way you memorize the first license plate that ever hits your bumper, letter by letter, until the sound of it lives in your teeth. Upstairs the iron hissed, and she hummed a melody she only used when she wanted me to believe she was relaxed. It sounded like stage lighting, warm from a distance, blinding up close. She floated down in a white blouse. You don't iron at 10 p.m. unless it's for someone who won't see you at 10 a.m. Breakfast with a client at 7, she said, breezy rehearsed. She kissed my cheek. She tasted like mint and heat. Don't wait up. I won't, I answered, and meant it differently than she heard. The door closed with the confident click of a habit. The house swallowed the sound and stared at me. Houses do that when they want you to admit something. I rinsed the sink until steel pretended to be a lake and counted half a dozen innocent explanations. Late Pilates, brand brainstorm, an old friend in town. I stacked them in my head like plastic cups and watched them collapse under their own weight. At 23:11, our joint email chimed with a rideshare receipt to a boutique hotel we both knew by its lobby smell more than its name. At 23:33, my bank app flashed an authorization. Room service. 2 covers. At 0:04, Find My drew a quiet blue arc from our street to a small square on the map I used to adore. Most men would have driven there, hammered on a door until security learned their middle name. Maybe I'm not most men. Or maybe I finally listened to the one thing my father taught me by not saying it twice. Don't go to war angry. Go to war prepared. I made tea I didn't want, poured it down the drain like a ritual, and took a spiral notebook from the drawer where orphan hex keys go to think about their choices. I wrote the date. The time. Marco. Same place. No photos. Key at front. Room service 2 covers. Then, in my own hand, crooked, unfamiliar, I wrote an intention. I will not lose my temper. I will not lose anything else. The house's night noises took attendance. The refrigerator's hummingbird wing, the pantry pipe clearing its throat, the faint tick of the oven cooling like it had an opinion. I walked the perimeter like a man teaching his heart there are still corners he owns. Living room, hall, my office with the lamp that makes paper look kinder. On the bookshelf, our wedding frame smiled like a lyre. The hairline crack across the bedroom ceiling looked like a river I had stopped seeing months ago. Tonight it looked like a route. At 1:49, the alarm app reported front door opened and at 1:50 closed. I lay on the bed like an understudy trying not to wake the lead and taught my breath how to pretend sleep. She set keys in the ceramic dish with the same soft clink that had once sounded like home. The shower told a story about steam that had nothing to wash away. When she slid under the sheets, we were 6 inches apart. Whisper distance when you're in love, an ocean when you're not. I didn't cross it. Neither did she. Somewhere near 3, sleep jumped me like a stranger in a doorway and stole an hour I couldn't defend. When it left behind something I hadn't felt since the day we signed our first contract with the company, a plan trying to be born. Morning arrived the way debt collectors do, polite at first, then inevitable. She was already in the kitchen when I came down, moving through her choreography, kettle, pan, berries bleeding pink into the sink. We traded sentences designed to be rearranged into a happy marriage by anyone listening through the wall. Schedules, groceries, the neighbor's sprinkler that goes off at midnight like it believes in thunderstorms.
Big day?
She asked, pouring coffee like a truce.
They always are,
I said, and watched the sentence die on contact with the air. We ate eggs we didn't taste. She adjusted her sleeve like she was straightening a story. When she touched my forearm, 2 fingers, soft, practiced, I let the contact live for 3 seconds, then turned to rinse a plate. Politeness can be a weapon if you keep it clean. She left with a kiss near my cheekbone and a smile that wanted to rent the future by the hour. The door did its quiet trick again. The house returned to the size it is when nobody's lying to it. I opened the notebook and drew 4 columns with names I could live with: private, public, legal, safe. In private, I wrote what I wouldn't say yet and the distance I would practice. Fewer answers, fewer invitations, fewer chances for her to spend me like petty cash. In public, I listed rooms where truth wears a suit, calendars, expense reconciliation, badge access logs that sound like linen but behave like handcuffs. Legal got 2 bullets: mediator consult, signatory thresholds at the company I co-founded with Marco. I wasn't trying to punish. I was trying not to leave my future in the glove compartment of someone else's car. Safe got its own page, copies that don't ask batteries for permission to exist. I opened the router admin panel and stared at the quiet honesty of timestamps. Unknown device had joined our network twice last week between midnight and 2. MAC address I didn't recognize. I screenshotted, printed, slid the page into a manila sleeve. The printer clicked like a metronome for an ugly song. Next, find my histories, wallet exports, the calendar overlaps she thought were clever because they were labeled wellness and client breakfast. I cleaned them of everything that could embarrass me and left only what could defend me. I added a line across the tab of the sleeve, in case I start pretending again. Our wedding photo sat on the shelf and grinned its eternal grin. I looked at the man in the frame the way commuters look at strangers just before the train shutters, quick, sympathetic, powerless. I wanted to tell him a sentence I wish someone had told me. Love's first job is to tell the truth. If it stops, it's not a job anymore. It's a hobby with kissing. At 9:07, a courier rang. A flat box with her name, the kind of boutique stationery store that sells apologies disguised as embossing. I set it on the credenza untouched. I was not going to become the man I wanted to beat. I fixed the hallway hinge she'd mentioned, 3 screws, not 2, and a hand that didn't rush. It felt like theft to let that small success count on a morning like this, but bodies need wins. I let it count. By noon, sunlight had shifted from forgiving to forensic. Dust motes crossed the kitchen like evidence waiting for a clipboard. Under public, I added 3 words. Compliance wants patterns. Under safe, boxes beat clouds. I packed a slim zip case, 2 encrypted drives labeled T1 and T2, the printed timeline, the router logs, the letter to the version of me who loves mercy too early. I slid the case under a sweater at the back of the closet, behind winter coats that believe in hiding. I was putting dishes in the drying rack when my phone buzzed with a calendar push from Marco. Board prep, 3 p.m. my office. Big finish. His tone tasted like victory he hadn't earned. For years that bravado had been the engine of our pitch. Today it sounded like a man tap dancing on a trapdoor. I wiped the counter one last time, told the house thank you the way you thank a bridge you've just crossed, and went to the one place I could still control without raising my voice. The revolving door pulled me into the building like a tide that used to know my name. Steel, glass, elevator chimes, our company's heartbeat, steady as ever, pretending not to notice I was different. I crossed the lobby with a leader's smile I had practiced in more honest years, and nodded to the guard, who slid a stack of overnight mail toward me, as if paper were still the heaviest thing a man could carry. My office sat where it always did, corner, glass on two sides, the city spread like circuitry. I unlocked the door and paused in the threshold the way you do before entering a room where you once loved someone. Same desk, same tidy cruelty of cable management, same pen cup with the one pen I never let interns borrow. Different owner, though. The version of me who used to come here believed work could fix anything you were strong enough to outlast. The version who stepped over the rug now had a smaller belief. Work can fix work. The rest needs a different toolbox. I opened the laptop. The fan spun up, small and determined. Prepared is a feeling you build. I said it in my head, heard my father's version in the back of it, and began with the least glamorous part of revenge. Admin. Facilities first. Short, precise, dull on purpose. Badge access variance sampling. Routine compliance refresh ahead of audit. Small window. Limited roles. Secure folder delivery. ICC legal the way you carry a visible umbrella on a day when you don't actually need it. The request left my outbox and became somebody else's morning. Good. Let paperwork walk. Finance next. Expenses don't lie if you teach them how to talk. I spun up a reconciliation view that grouped charges by merchant type and hours respectable people pretend don't exist. Midnight meals. Boutique hotels allergic to harsh lighting. The same rideshare curb cut at the same curb. I filtered by cardholders we kept closest to budget and watched heat bloom where it shouldn't. I didn't print. Printers are trumpets. Today I was a drum. At 9:06, Marco filled my doorway like a story trying to decide whether it was comedy. Leather jacket, the one I bought him the night our Series A hit the account, hung off his shoulders as if it missed the man he used to be. He didn't knock. He never did. People who believe they belong think what is for other people.
Got a minute?
He asked, already halfway to the chair.
For you? Always,
I said, letting the screen slide to sleep. He dropped into the seat, set his phone face down, palmed it like a coin. The spiderweb crack caught a ribbon of sunlight and, for a second, the whole office felt like a photograph that knew it would be used as evidence.
We good for the update?
He said, grin tuned to board frequency.
I want to lead with pipeline. Keep the room warm. Lead with controls,
I said lightly.
Directors sleep better when they hear hygiene before they hear growth.
He smiled. Then the right corner of his mouth forgot.
Since when do we open with controls? Since we're big enough for someone to ask why we didn't.
He watched me long enough to measure a weather change.
Right,
he said finally, a beat too late.
Smart.
He stood, half turning.
Drinks tonight? Rain check,
I said.
Long day.
He lifted his phone, set it back down, decided not to say the next thing.
Cool,
he said, and left a cologne ghost behind that had nothing to do with hotels and everything to do with habit. When he was gone, I let the screen wake and built the surface I planned to walk across without breaking it. A one-page ethics and controls refresh I could send to the board 20 minutes before we met, long enough for them to feel informed, too short to forward to their sons. For bullets, deliberately boring, travel reconciliation with a mild heat map, vendor revalidation with check marks that calm the room, card governance with the phrase,
consolidation of approvers,
to make lawyers purr, badge variance sampling, with one non-threatening line about aligning access and declared work. Each bullet was a door I could open later while pretending I'd always planned to. Facilities replied at 10:22, pulling the sample now. Secure folder by noon. I thanked them in a sentence that made me sound like the sort of person who remembers birthdays and pays vendors on time. I did both this week, which felt almost like religion. Anita, the earliest investor who'd bet on us when our shirts matched more from poverty than taste, appeared in my doorway without knocking. You don't knock on doors that used to be yours.
Walk,
she said, and started before I stood. The hallway's windows made the city into schematics. She took 2 steps, 3, then glanced at my reflection instead of me, the way predators check wind.
I read your controls note,
she said.
It's boring by design,
I said.
Boring is a weapon,
she said.
Is this wise or is it a tell?
Both, I said, and she smiled without warmth.
What should I expect to hear today that isn't on the page? A variance map,
I said.
A plan to tighten cards. We'll call it housekeeping. Housekeeping is what you say when you're not ready to say the word problem,
she said.
Do you have a problem? I have a plan,
I said.
Good.
She angled her head.
You look like a man who sleeps again. I dream mostly in spreadsheets,
I said.
Fine,
she said.
Don't surprise me. Surprise him.
She walked away like exits had always waited for her. Noon delivered a secure folder like a quiet blessing. Badge variance _Q2_sample.csv. Door readers don't compete for sympathy. They testify. I filtered to executives and squeezed the hours down to the ones when honesty goes home. There he was, twice past midnight on nights that knew how to spell wellness. Once at 1:11 on a Thursday that had already learned how to pretend. I added 3 rows to a private sheet titled Correlations I Can Say Out Loud and left it there like a fuse someone else could light if I fell. Legal's check-in belonged to a genre I call neutral T. We talk signatory thresholds, approver consolidation, and the acceptable number of cards an organization can own before it starts feeling like a hydra. I asked for 2 temporary reassignments. In light of best practice. Counsel tilted her head toward the word risk like a sunflower toward noon.
If framed as mitigation,
she said.
Fine.
I wrote 6 words that would read well in any room. As discussed, counsel approved temporary reassignment. Lunch broke around the floor. A symphony of paper, plastic, faint laughter from people who might still love someone who loves them back. I stood at the glass and watched the city practice forgetting me. Behind me, Marco laughed the way men laugh when they think the room belongs to them. He said a director's name like it was a pet. For years, I had enjoyed that sound. Now it made me want to inventory every drawer in his vocabulary. At 1:58, I sent the ethics and controls refresh to the board list. The tone read like a maintained car. Proactive hygiene. Ahead of audit. Ensuring alignment. Words you can take to church without upsetting old people. Read receipts arrived like shuffled cards. Anita, 2 others, the quiet one who never writes and sees everything. At 2:10 Marco'd med, nice touch. Didn't know you were cooking that up. I replied with the world's smallest ceasefire. By mid-afternoon, the plan had bones. It needed a spine. I opened my notebook and wrote the sentence that would decide how this ended. No confrontation until I've already won. I underlined it twice, closed the cover, and looked at the city like it owed me nothing and still might give me the thing I needed most. A room where truth could walk in, sit down, and not have to raise its voice. The boardroom smelled of leather chairs and expensive nerves. 12 seats around a table so glossy it reflected sins. 6 screens mounted like judges who never blink. Marco stood at the head, sleeves rolled to elbow, grin tuned to charismatic. If charm were currency, he'd have funded the company twice. If betrayal were taxable, we could have paid off the debt ceiling. I sat 3 chairs down, binder open to nothing that mattered. Because the real meeting wasn't about pipeline or projections. It was about the invisible arithmetic of trust, and Marco's columns no longer balanced. He started with his rhythm. Big numbers, bigger adjectives, the kind of cadence that makes even cautious men loosen their ties. He clicked slides like a magician flipping cards.
Growth, trajectory, untapped markets,
he said, and directors nodded as if vowels could compound interest. For a moment, I remembered why I once believed in him. Then I remembered who had been in my kitchen last night, and belief tasted like poison in a fancy bottle. When the room warmed, I leaned forward.
"If I may,"
I said, calm, measured.
"I'd like to touch on governance before we move to Q&A."
Marco's jaw flexed, small but visible. He liked to control the sequence. Today, sequence belonged to me. I pulled up the one-pager. Ethics and controls refresh. Boring font, restrained headings. I walked them through card consolidation, badge variants, reconciliation highlights. Each bullet a pebble placed carefully on a scale. When I mentioned
"variances after hours,"
I let the phrase hang just long enough for Anita to tilt her head. Marco smiled too fast, like someone swatting a fly only he could see.
"Of course,"
I said smoothly.
"these are routine checks. Preventative. But they remind us that growth and control are not opposites. They are siblings."
Director scribbled. Marco sipped water he didn't need. When the meeting closed, he clapped my shoulder hard enough to bruise.
"Nice save,"
he said. His voice tried to sound brotherly. It sounded like borrowed time. The house waited for me like a witness with sealed lips. She was already there, apron tied, pasta boiling. The scene was painted domestic, but the brushstrokes were too neat. She looked up with that smile, practiced, polite.
"Long day?"
"Productive," I said, kissing her temple out of habit, not hunger. Dinner was plate scraping, silverware tapping. She talked about a client who didn't understand strategy. I nodded. She talked about her friend who wanted advice on renovations. I nodded. She talked about maybe taking a weekend trip, just the two of us. I didn't nod. Instead, I studied her hands. They moved fast, too fast. Guilt makes fingers nervous. After dishes, she reached for me. I let her. Her lips pressed like apologies she wouldn't speak. I pulled away, soft enough not to start a war, firm enough to let her feel the border. She frowned, but only for a heartbeat. Then she hit it with laughter, the kind that breaks before the echo finishes. I excused myself, claiming emails. Upstairs, I opened the manila sleeve. The router logs, the calendar overlaps, the expense scans, my quiet army. I added tonight's observation, hands restless, mask slipping. Revenge is patient, but notes keep it honest. Evan buzzed me in with the urgency of someone who doesn't want to explain to neighbors. His place smelled like coffee gone stale, and books that believed in him once. He closed the door before I could thank him.
"You saw it, didn't you?"
he asked. His voice was tired, like he'd been holding this question behind his teeth for weeks.
"I saw enough,"
I said. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey. No ice. The kind you sip when you need courage more than comfort.
"I didn't want to be the one to tell you,"
he admitted. But you needed proof.
"Now you have it."
I have more than proof, I said.
"I have a plan."
He raised an eyebrow.
"Dangerous?" "Precise,"
I corrected.
"No shouting, no fights. Just facts. Delivered at the right time."
Evan exhaled.
"Marco thinks he's untouchable. She thinks you'll forgive. You'll be the first thing either of them ever got wrong."
We clinked glasses without smiling. It wasn't celebration. It was acknowledgement, like 2 soldiers sharpening the same blade. She was asleep when I got home, or pretending. I watched her breathing, too even, too controlled. She always underestimated silence. It tells more truth than words. I sat at the desk, opened the notebook, and wrote a single line across the page. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. But soon. Then I slid it back into the drawer, where it joined the other evidence, waiting. The house exhaled, and for once, I let myself sleep. Coffee steamed on my desk. Marco strode in, tossing a file like it was a frisbee.
"We crushed it yesterday,"
he said, grinning.
"Board's eating out of our hands."
I opened the file. Travel receipts. Entertainment charges. His handwriting on reimbursement slips that belonged in a courtroom, not a ledger. I flipped a page. Boutique hotels. Midnight timestamps. The same names, the same lies.
"Good work,"
I said flatly. He mistook it for approval. That was fine. Let him. He leaned against my desk, casual, careless.
"You and me, brother. Nobody can touch us."
I smiled just enough.
"You're right,"
I said.
"Nobody can."
And as he left, I marked another page in the ledger. Another nail, waiting for the right coffin. She cooked again. She smiled again. She lied again. But this time, when her phone buzzed and she excused herself, I didn't follow. I didn't need to. I had the map, the logs, the receipts. And patience sharpens knives better than whetstones. I poured wine into a glass I didn't drink. I stared at the photo of us on our wedding day. Two people smiling at a future that didn't exist. Then I whispered,
"It's almost time."
The house listened. And agreed. The sun dipped low, painting the living room in orange that felt too beautiful for what I carried inside. She flitted around the kitchen, humming, laying out plates as if we were newlyweds instead of conspirators in different crimes.
"Dinner tonight with Marco,"
she said casually.
"He wants to celebrate. We should all be together."
The invitation was wrapped in normalcy, but her eyes darted too quick, like a gambler bluffing on a weak hand.
"Perfect,"
I said. I'm in it. Tonight was perfect. Tonight would be the stage. When she left to change, I opened the drawer, pulled the notebook and the manila sleeve, checked every page like a pilot before takeoff. Router logs. Receipts. Calendar overlaps. Hotel charges. Marco's reimbursement slips. Her restless hand scribbled in margin notes. All the truth they had hidden, cataloged in black and white. I slipped it into a slim black folder, shut the drawer, and whispered, "Showtime." The restaurant was the kind of place that pretended to be intimate by charging extra for dim lights. Candles flickered on polished wood tables, violins hummed through speakers. Marco sat already, leather jacket draped over his chair. Confidence poured into a grin. She sat beside him, dressed in red, a color that shouted louder than she realized. I arrived with my folder under my arm. They rose, smiles wide, eyes nervous.
"Brother,"
Marco said, clapping my back.
"Tonight we celebrate." "Absolutely,"
I said, sliding into the seat opposite.
"Let's make it unforgettable."
Dinner began with pleasantries, wine poured, appetizers ordered. She laughed too often, Marco spoke too loudly. Both were trying to drown out their guilt with volume. I let them. Every note they played only made my silence sharper. When entrees arrived, I set the folder on the table. Black leather against white cloth. Marco froze, fork halfway to his mouth. She glanced at it, then at me.
"What's that?"
she asked, voice thin.
"Something I thought we should share."
I opened it. One page at a time, I slid the documents across. Hotel receipts. Rideshare logs. Calendar overlaps. Photos of router activity. Marco's expense slips with his handwriting bleeding guilt. Her hand shook. Marco's grin died.
"What the hell is this?"
He snapped too fast.
"Evidence,"
I said softly.
"of two people who thought lies could hide in daylight."
Her lips parted. No words came. Marco leaned forward, anger boiling.
"You think you can just—" "I don't think,"
I interrupted.
"I know. And so will the board. So will HR. So will compliance. Every document here has already been copied and secured. This folder is just a courtesy. A preview of your ending.
Silence. Thick, suffocating. The waiter approached, tray in hand, then stopped, sensing a storm. He turned away, quickly, wisely.
You're bluffing,
Marco said. His voice cracked. I leaned back, calm.
Try me. Tomorrow morning, the board gets the full package. And if you push me, I'll make sure the DA sees it too.
Her eyes filled with tears.
Please don't ruin us. You ruined yourselves,
I said. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Truth doesn't shout. Marco slammed his hand on the table. Silverware jumped.
You think this company is yours without me? You think you can erase me? I don't need to erase you,
I said.
You'll do that yourself. When the board sees how you misused funds, how you falsified receipts, how you violated every trust we built, they'll have no choice. You're finished. Both of you.
Her tears spilled. She reached for my hand.
I love you,
she whispered, desperate. I pulled back.
You loved what you could take from me.
The night ended not with shouting, but with silence. Marco stormed out, jacket over his shoulder, fury shaking his steps. She lingered, trying to explain, to justify, to beg. I let her words wash over me like rain on stone. None of them mattered. When she finally left, head down, I sat alone at the table, the folder closed. The candle flickered low. I felt lighter, not because the betrayal hurt less, but because it finally had a name, a weight, a plan. The boardroom was colder today. Anita sat at the far end, reading the folder I had sent hours earlier. Directors whispered, glanced at Marco's empty chair. When the meeting began, Anita cleared her throat.
We've reviewed the evidence,
she said.
This is not a debate. This is a reckoning.
Eyes turned to me. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. Marco's absence screamed louder than any victory speech. The vote was unanimous. Marco was removed, pending legal review. His accounts frozen. His access revoked. Afterward, Anita walked up, her heels sharp against marble.
You played this well,
she said.
Clean. Precise.
I nodded.
Messy revenge doesn't last. Clean exits do.
She smiled faintly.
Remember that?
The house felt different. Quieter. Honest. She was gone now, her things packed in haste, drawers empty where her lies once lived. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful. I poured a glass of wine, sat at the table, opened my notebook. I wrote the last line. I didn't lose my temper. I didn't lose myself. I only lost those who were never mine. The house sighed, and for the first time in months, I sighed with it.